Welcome, everybody. Thank you for attending our webinar, Cybersecurity for Nonprofits, a very important topic. We're going to be looking over, I'm going to show you a little bit about the Center for Nonprofits, and then I'll be turning this over to Jim Peterson, who's our presenter today. We have I want to tell you a little bit about the Center for Nonprofits. My name is Debbie Duncan, and I am the Director of Education Services for the Center. I've been here for 17 years, and I help with these webinars, help desk resources, and other information sharing support. We do three things primarily. We are an advocacy organization. We represent the interests of the nonprofit sector to our legislators and policymakers. We then educate the nonprofits about the issues that are involved and what action can be taken. And we do a little bit of research, like our annual survey, which is available on our webpage. Education is a major piece of what we do, such as this webinar. We have a variety of activities throughout the year, networking, webinars, workshops, and in December we have our annual conference, which is a big piece of our education program. But there are also publications and resources on our website. It's a very large website, so don't hesitate to poke around, and don't hesitate to send us a quick email to center@njnonprofits.org, and that's the mailbox that we monitor the most. Finally, we are a membership organization. Our membership is based on a sliding scale based on your budget size. We provide discounts and, in a lot of cases, free services for members. It's well worth supporting the nonprofit sector and becoming a member, but we respond to everybody. And you don't have to be incorporated. You don't have to have your 501c3 status. If you're in accordance, if you meet the standards for a charitable organization, we are here to help you. Finally, I just want to let you know that we are one of many other state associations for nonprofits in the United States. We are a member of the National Council of Nonprofits, who support us, but wherever you go, there is going to be a state association, if not in that immediate state, in the one next to it. So remember that these are resources that are available to everybody. So please don't hesitate to share this information. Okay, let me present Jim Peterson. He is with ConnectWise. He's the Principal Solution Advisor, and this whole program is being presented by HighLink Technologies, a Center Associate member. We really appreciate being allowed this opportunity to share expertise and skill with you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and introduce Jim.
Thank you very much, Debbie. I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody, for letting us or having us be part of this webinar. We're very excited to share a little information about cybersecurity and more about bad actors and just in general what you can do to protect yourself, because we do know that nonprofits are typically a little more susceptible to some of the risks in the cyber crime world. So we'll dig into a few of those today. Just a quick background. I've been in cybersecurity and data protection for around 25 years, working with small businesses, MSPs, and now I'm in the channel of MSPs trying to help businesses convey their message, understand what's going on with the trends in cybersecurity, and be prepared for the next shift, which is always coming. So, all right, so let's dig right in. When we talk about cybersecurity, we had this old definition that it's a practice of protecting systems, networks, and program from digital attacks. But one thing that we know is true and really hits home, I think, in the nonprofit community is that it's much larger than that. We have to protect people's information, specifically our clients and our team members. There's a lot of personal identifiable information in the world today and on our systems that we want to make sure we keep away from the bad actors. So the cybersecurity term has grown quite a bit. And when we talk about cybersecurity, we often hear of the tools. We'll throw a lot of acronyms out there like MDR, which stands for Managed Detection and Response. But we'll throw a lot of acronyms out there. We think about the tools, but we often don't think about the process and the people behind it, because the technology can be deployed today or tomorrow and be in great shape for 30, 45 days, maybe even a little bit longer. But eventually we'll start to have decay in that tool if it's not updated and managed properly. So we got to think about that holistic piece. Then we also have BCDR solutions to make sure we can recover, because the one thing we'll say a lot in this presentation is we never want to hand over our recovery of information to the bad actors. When we think of ransomware and some of the other risks out there, when we hand that over, we're at their mercy and we have to pay them to hopefully get our data back. We want to avoid that as much as possible. And a good business continuity and disaster recovery solution can help solve from that happening. And that last piece is assessments. There was a time in history where an organization would come in and do an assessment and you'd be good for 5 or 6 years because not a lot changed. Technology may change, it may be updated, but we kind of felt like things stayed consistent. Now we're recommending to have continual assessments, or at least assessments every year from your trusted advisor, whether that's an internal company or an external company, to have somebody come in and put eyes on all of the equipment. In 2022, just as a quick stat, we had roughly 19% turnover in the technology industry, and we lost a lot of information in small businesses, nonprofits, and in the MSP industry itself, or managed service providers, IT service provider industry. And without great documentation and assessments, we may forget where things are sitting, what their duty is, how old they are, what their patch schedules are. So we want to make sure we have these continual assessments so we know what's going on in our environments. All right, moving on, right? A couple of terms you'll hear throughout this presentation are attack, incident, and breach. And these mean something in our industry, right? Attack, they're happening all the time. There's millions of attacks going on right now. We are all being attacked, right? Somebody's sending us an email. They're trying to get in through our firewalls. They're doing activity. The attacks don't care about how large your business is. They don't care about what your role is. They care about getting activity. They want you to do something so that they can take the next step. And if they get something to happen and they take that next step, it's called an incident. So an incident means an attack has gotten past a layer of technology meant to stop it. A real easy example is I get an email in and I really am tired. It's at the end of the day and I click the link when I know I shouldn't have, or I don't know I shouldn't have, but I still click it. That's actually an incident because it bypassed my security awareness training, the training that tells me to be skeptical, right? Now, that's not great. We would all agree with that, but it gets really bad when we move to the breach, and that B word we try to avoid at any time unless someone has told you specifically that you can use that term. But a breach means it got past a layer of technology and it actually got to the data. It read it, it deleted it, modified it, did something. So those three terms are really important, and we always want to keep things at incidences. We're going to have incidences no matter what, because we're human, we make mistakes, we do things. But the goal in all of this technology talk is to stop it there so it never gets to the breach level. Now, switching to bad actors, right? We have these bad actors in the world, and we typically put them into 3 different buckets: solo hackers, nation states, and organized crime. Now, solo hackers is kind of the war game style. If you're old like me and you remember that movie, it's an individual or very, very small group of people that are doing these attacks. They were very prolific and very effective early on in the cybersecurity journey. They become less effective. Now, they can still do really good work, but the ability to scale a solo hacker, their work is more and more challenging as the defenses are getting better and better. Nation states really don't apply to most small businesses because typically nation states are attacking other nation states or large organizations where they're trying to get intellectual property or trade secrets. Our real challenge comes with organized crime. These are businesses typically overseas that have HR departments. They have recruiting companies or divisions. They have pay and bonus scales. They're very effective and they're very good at what they do. The big difference between organized crime and solo hackers is that ability to scale. If they find a vulnerability, it's tricking a lot of us. They can apply massive resources to it to scale that attack and affect more and more companies. Now, how do they get paid, right? So we get these bad actors, they're doing this stuff. Obviously, it's for money, and we'll see a quick slide on that in a minute. But there's typically three areas of payments that these bad actors get. A ransom, which just means you have to pay them to restore access or restore information that they have either encrypted or stolen or deleted. Extortion means you have to pay them so that they don't release sensitive information to the rest of the world. And then data sale has really not a lot to do with you. If you have very valuable data, they may just take it and sell it on the dark web because the value there is more than the ransom or extortion. Ransom and extortion are the two most impactful to most businesses, including nonprofits. But we'll also talk about data sale from time to time, because if we disrupt the attack and get to the point where they can't ransom us, or maybe they can't extort us, they always have that third option. And the bad actors are just looking for the most money. That's all they really care about. So how do they get in, right? This won't be a surprise. The majority of the time, we are the reason that bad actors get in. We've done something to allow them access. When I said I clicked the link earlier in the presentation, roughly 80% of the time, we are doing something that kicks off the bad actor attack. And you won't be surprised, right? Credentials are the most common way that bad actors get in. They've taken our username and password and they found it in some way, some method. Either we click a link and we put accidentally in our username and password. We've reused passwords, which means I use the same password on LinkedIn as I do on Netflix, as I do in my domain. And if any of those get hacked, they all get hacked. Even using different email addresses doesn't necessarily save us, because as you'll see in a minute, these bad actors leveraging AI and doing social engineering can find out a lot more about you than we typically think they can. We're going to leverage multi-factor authentication to increase the protection of credentials. We're dropping that 49% down to the single digits. It's not perfect. It's not 100% foolproof, but nothing really is in the cybersecurity journey. That's a huge improvement over what we have today. Next is phishing, and these are the links, right? So clicking something that does an activity on our computer. So we click the link, it could encrypt, it could launch an attack, it could just launch some dormant malware information on your computer that can be leveraged later. And we're going to do security awareness training and email filtering to protect against these specific attacks. So if we increase our skepticism of everything technology-based, it'll improve our stance. And then hopefully the filters are cleaning out as much as possible. And last is this exploit side. So the first two are really the people side of things. The exploits are more systems and software. So it's vulnerabilities in those hardware devices or those software packages that can create exploits that can be taken advantage of by the bad actors. Now, we typically do things like system patching and assessments to help defend against exploits. System patching is the number one thing, but we have to do these assessments continually to find equipment that may have gotten lost in the shuffle or may need to be retired because it's no longer being updated. It's this kind of continual cycle of trying to remove things that are dangerous in an environment. Now, once a bad actor gets in, so we know who they are, it's typically organized crime. They get in because we made a mistake, right? And they're trying to maximize their payout. Once they get in, the first thing they're going to do is investigate the network. They want to understand what type of business you are, what type of data you have, and again, what the best course of the maximum payout is for them. So they're going to spend a significant amount of time understanding your environment, understanding your leadership structure, how people communicate, and what data you have. From there, they're taking the data. They want to exfiltrate it so that if we disrupt their attack from this point on, at least they have that data and they can fall back to extortion or data sale. From there, the most common target is to manipulate the BCDR, or business continuity disaster recovery solution. Basically your backups, right? They want to disable them, delete them, make them ineffective. So you have to require or rely on them to restore information. And from there, they're going to mess with production, and that's when they'll actually do the ransom request. A surprising fact, because most organizations don't understand that on average, this takes 200 days. It seems like a very, very long time. And that 200 days comes in a lot of different conversations, because we're like, well, I clicked the link 200 days ago. I didn't think anything happened, so I didn't say anything.
No.
And all of a sudden, 4 months later, oh no, we have a breach, and it's hard to tie back all of the information. And we're also used to the one-day clicks or immediate incidences where I clicked a link and it started doing something that I could notice. So this is the real attack that we're scared of. These are the ones that cost hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to organizations to reverse, because there's lots of data, lots of risk, and they're very patient for this payout. Now, as I said before, right, we're not going to be surprised. Money is the reason that these organized crimes attack us, take their time, find the data, and try that maximum ransom, extort, or data sale. 10.3 billion in 2022, and that is just ransom and extortion. I'm still trying to work up the 2023 numbers. Hopefully we'll get that by the next time we talk. But this is such a small percentage of the total cost of cyber crime, because this is, again, just the ransom and extortion that has been presented to the FBI. So if I paid a $50,000 ransom and I didn't want my team or my competition or my industry to know, and I didn't report it, it's not in this number. Also, all of any revenue disruption is not in this number. So remediation is not in this number. Legal fees are not in this. So we know cybercrime is an enormous figure for the United States specifically, but the worldwide also impactful. So something to consider, that this is a big dollar figure, right? Now, when we think of small businesses and nonprofits, we had a couple conversations coming up to this webinar and saying, why are nonprofits typically at a little more risk? And one of the ways, not the only way, but one of the reasons that this is true is most small businesses are highly focused on profitability inside the company. How is the company profiting? And they'll put barriers up to protect that. Where most nonprofits are looking outbound, how do we impact and look out into the community to serve? And so a lot of times there's not as much focus on the internal operations, the internal security. Not saying that's your nonprofit, but just saying we see that consistently. So we understand there's some additional risk out there, and these are the kind of things that we're going to dig into in just a minute to say, how do we protect against these so that we can make sure we don't have as much risk, we can reduce our risk at the end of the day. So number one common challenge that we see specifically in the nonprofit community is hyper-personal social engineering. Now, this can be called spear phishing. There's probably a few other terms we could throw out there, but at the end of the day, we're trying to isolate a single person specifically in a nonprofit. And a lot of times this is going to be someone who visibly or has access to data or financials, right? And we'd probably say this happens in larger businesses as well. But if we're specifically targeting nonprofits, which a lot of, unfortunately, bad actors do, we know that this is a really common challenge, because typically that person that they're targeting has multiple hats, right? They may be the operational leader. They may also be in charge of finding new business to help donate. They may be in charge of intake. They have a lot of responsibilities typically in a lot of nonprofits. So we know if we can attack and hyper personalize that social engineering, we have a much higher rate of success. And AI is powering a significant amount of this. It's kind of scary to go and do some AI research on individual nonprofits or individual people to find out more about them, again, than we want to know. Now, right before we launched here, we were talking a little bit about some of the deep fake things as well. I can get 10-second clip of you talking and turn that into a pretty reliable conversation that we could have or request using completely different words than you were using in that 10-second clip. Deepfake is a risk. So when we're thinking about how we handle money, how we handle data, and how we handle access, anymore, just picking up the phone call or listening to a recording isn't good enough. Even eyes on, and we hate to say this because we're not quite there yet, but we need to be ready for it. Eyes on. I can see Debbie right now, but I can trust about 99% that that's really Debbie on the other end. But as deepfake gets better and better, we just have to be aware of these type of risks. And these social engineering attacks, they just bypass our general defenses. If I know a significant amount about you personally from my research, I can answer a lot of your personal questions. Unfortunately, it lowers our defenses. We want to still have high defenses, but the more I know about you and your organization and how you operate, the easier it is, and this is just the fact, the easier it is to bypass your general defense. So to get that higher success rate. So as we're thinking about some of these challenges, hyper-personal social engineering really comes in to say, I'm going to attack that company and I'm going to see what I can do, or that nonprofit, to see what I can do to gather their information. So awareness is key here. And we'll talk about MFA, multi-factor authentication, helping a little bit here, but really that security awareness training is where this kind of comes in. Now, obviously they're doing these activities to get to data. And so majority of the time, they could also be doing CFO or bank fraud and trying to transfer money. That's definitely a common thing. But typically bad actors start off with, I need a data breach because I have to get to information. And one thing we know about nonprofits, right, is they have very valuable information, especially as nonprofits are working with individuals in their community or in their region. So that valuable data can be significantly more valuable than a lot of small businesses would have. Most small businesses have sales information, some internal processes, a lot of quotes and documents that they need, but not as much personal identifiable information as the bad actors would want. Nonprofits, especially if you're working with individuals, you might have a lot of this. So high concentration on data breach. Again, this falls back to the limited resource side of things. We think of, again, nonprofits, right? You're wearing a lot of hats, you're doing a lot of work, you're working hard to help your community. And that kind of distributed focus can really impact cybersecurity. You're impact focused, we know that, and versus necessarily, revenue or profit focused. And one of the key things on this data breach side is most organizations today are using some sort of third-party SaaS application for their ERP, we'll call it their enterprise software, or their core software system. We are, unfortunately, and we got to think about this a little bit, one step away from that data being vulnerable. So one of the common things we'll say is, hey, if you're using a third-party SaaS solution, especially for your core data, to make sure you understand what is that company's compliance, what is their recovery process, basically how safe is that data up in the cloud? Because it's really easy for us to send data up there and be like, well, I'm going to say this nicely, it's their problem, right? It's their problem. But at the end of the day, we know it's our problem, because if a breach were to occur and we lost a lot of, especially individual information, it just shines a bad light on us. And obviously some physical security gaps are out there as well, but those are changing over time as we get better and better protected on laptops. So just making sure we have things like encrypted hard drives and multi-factor authentication, we can really start to diminish the risk of physical security gaps. Now, obviously you see some, Debbie, we're going to jump in there?
Yeah, I just wanted to, first of all, again, what is SAS? Defining some of those
Oh,
the
sorry.
terms
Thank
as use
you.
them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Nope. I got to get called on. I'm that technical guy. Just throw them out there.
Yeah.
The software as a service, SaaS
Okay.
applications.
Hmm.
Yeah. And if we
Okay.
think of Microsoft 365, Exchange Online, SharePoint, OneDrive, these are basic storage SaaS application, software
Okay.
as a service. We basically rent that software on typically a monthly basis. Sorry.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, I do have one question here that I think might be appropriate at the moment, which is SMS, as in texting, multi-factor authentication sufficient? I hesitate to use authenticators because it's a real headache when, for example, someone's device is lost and thus they lose access to their authenticator. But I've heard that SMS isn't all that secure. Is that true?
Yeah, so we would typically put this in three levels of MFA. Technically four, right? No MFA, which is bad. SMS is typically level 2. So level 1 would be an email authentication. So basically, because the problem is if I get into email, then I have that completely available to me. So level 0 is no MFA. Level 1 is I get an email notification for my SMS, for my multi-factor authentication code. SMS is number 2. There are some risks with it, some challenges. There's some really technical stuff like SIM swapping, where I could clone your SIM card, and I mean it takes a lot of brain power. So there's got to be a real good reason for it to access that. But in all nature, if my phone's just sitting next to me and I'm in an airport and I do MFA code, it can pop up. And again, we'll see it as it pops up, even if your phone's locked. So that's the real risk with SMS. We do say the authenticator applications are the best, because it really puts another layer of authentication. I have to be able to get into my phone first of all, to be able to access that code. So still way better than nothing, but there's still a little bit more to go if you want to kind of get it as good as possible.
Okay, I'm going to ask my own question, which is when I'm texting, sometimes it says RCS message and then other times it's SMS. What's RCS?
Boy, I know there's SMS, right? And then there's Messenger. So there's a couple different types of text, but
Okay.
based on whether you have an Android or an iPhone, so
Um,
they'll cross over a little bit. Typically, SMS is the original one. It's
right.
just going to be basic text to a phone number. But as we get more and more advanced with our communication applications, some of them use individual protocols.
Okay. Thank
Okay,
you. Okay.
you're welcome. All right. So again, if we know, hey, that hyper personal social engineering, they're attacking you as a specific person, they're looking for data breach. And as we talked about before, we have ransom, extortion, and data sale. Ransom is typically the most common risk for nonprofits. Extortion is possible, and they can ask for cash, obviously, to not release data. But what we're seeing just is that ransom is more prolific, specifically in the nonprofit community. Obviously, one thing we don't have a document on here or a piece in this presentation is the cost of current ransomware attacks. If we looked 3 or 4 years ago, the majority of attacks were under $100,000 for ransom recovery. Lots of real challenges with that. Just because you pay doesn't mean you're getting your data back, number one, at all, or in
Mhm.
a timely manner. But this is scaling very, very quickly. Now we're averaging above $500,000 for ransom attacks. Now, this is a combination a little bit of having good cybersecurity insurance and also lots of challenges because or businesses have had a little bit more cash on hand over the last few years, so they're able to pay more. But that doesn't necessarily help the nonprofit community where a high percentage of every dollar goes into helping solve the problems they're trying to solve. So ransomware can be extremely impactful to nonprofits, where in a small business, it's still very, very impactful, but it's just in a significantly different way. Obviously, the reputational damage, loss of donor data would be significant impact on community by not being able to deliver the service, and then continually disrupts the operation. So ransomware, just again to talk real quick, if I encrypt all of your information, right, and you have to pay me to decrypt it, there's that time period between when you pay me and when it actually becomes available again. That's a pretty significant disruption. And we've had incidences where if they encrypt an environment, it may take 3 hours to decrypt a single terabyte. If you have 20 terabytes of data, it's a long time before we're quote back in business. So lots of common challenges between small businesses and nonprofits, but a lot of specific things in that nonprofit area. A couple of things that link I shared was just some real life cyber attacks, and I should have jumped into this. We see one just about every year, right, where millions of records are released to the environment or encrypted or stolen. So we know that it isn't just the small ones that are attacked because maybe they don't have the right technology. A lot of larger ones are in the same boat. And so everything we can do to try and protect and build layers of technology to stop things in an incident are really critical. Millions and millions of individuals affected. So okay, so again, how do we attack this? Now, you'll see a stack here, and this may be a little overwhelming from the different technologies in here. We are not saying that this is the right stack for every nonprofit. What we're saying here is we need to understand what your specific business needs are. And a lot of times this is going to come from that assessment, whether it's internal or whether you have somebody external do an assessment to say, here's your data, here's your industry, here's your current risks, here are the technologies that would make the most impact. And again, stopping things at an incident. If we looked at all these layers as being more like Swiss cheese than solid blocks, which is scary, right? But we know things are going to filter through. But if I can rely, example, on my DNS and web filtering to pick up when I make the mistake of clicking, that's a huge plus. It stopped it at an incident because DNS and web filtering stopped that search because it knew it was a bad site. But we look at these, there's a lot of bookends. So when I say bookends, MDR, managed detection and response. It used to be called AV. It's been upgraded many times, and we'll dig into the technology in a second. But that's kind of on the front end of the attack. And on that back end is that business continuity disaster recovery, where we're in charge of our recovery. We never hand it over to the bad actors. Used to be the last line of defense, and we still use that term a lot, but unfortunately, cybersecurity insurance has become the last line of defense. When we talk about that $500,000 payout, most organizations have to tap their cybersecurity insurance policy to be able to fund that type of recovery. And we know the bad actors are attacking those backup environments. So unfortunately, it's a new cost to most organizations, or newer cost to most organizations, and we have to rely on that going forward. Now, we're going to dig into most of these technologies, and the goal here isn't to memorize these or say you need all of them. It's just to get an awareness of what's out there. When we say MDR, DNS, security awareness training, all these terms are acronyms, what they mean, just so you can start asking questions, again, of your internal team or your external provider. And first is that MDR, or managed detection and response. Like I said, it used to be called antivirus, right? And antivirus was really good at stopping things it knew about. It was not good at stopping things it didn't know about. So we developed in the industry, now I say we, like I was part of it, I really wasn't part of it, but the industry developed endpoint detection and response. And what it did is it stopped known threats, but it also looked at the activity on the computer to say, is this normal activity? Should we expect computers to do this? Encrypting files is a really good example. I click a crypto locker virus and it starts encrypting things on my machine. EDR, endpoint detection and response, is going to say, that's a problem. Our computer shouldn't be doing that. Let's stop the activity and reverse the damage that it created. Great step forward, added significant protection to both computers and networks and people. But we also noticed then, well, I really need somebody to watch this 24/7. I may have somebody that can respond to this 8 to 5, an internal employee, or even an outsourced environment. But most attacks, most good attacks, happen after hours, weekends, Friday nights. And I need a security operations center, or SOC, to monitor that software to be able to respond. So now that's where MDR was created. So the managed is just the addition of SOC, or security operations center, to that endpoint detection software. All right. Next is DNS and web filtering. We'll just do a real quick brief of this. You go to Google, right? Everybody's happy, whether it's an on-prem solution or a hosted solution for your DNS and web filtering. Life is good. You go to Google with 5 O's. The system may not have heard of that before, so it may let it out. But when it comes back, it's going to inspect that traffic to say, what is it trying to do, when it hits that end computer? And if it's malicious, it's going to stop it. And that's the real benefit of this. Now, most DNS and web filtering, this was a big technology, I'd say 10 years ago. It was new. It's been around forever now. It's built into most software, most managed protection software. So you don't really hear about this specific technology, but just know it's working for you. Next is security awareness training. Some people call it cyber awareness training, cybersecurity awareness training. It's all the same thing. At the end of the day, we're trying to educate individuals on the current threats that are out there. We're also going to test, and this is where it gets a little stressful for some employees, because we're going to test on this too. And we're testing for 2 reasons. One, did the training fit? Does it make sense for the current threats in the environment? Because if I train you on credit card fraud, but I attack you with a different vector, you may not see that. So I got to make sure my training aligns with the current risks. It's also going to test to see if you're gathering the information, just to make sure it's being helpful for individuals and holistically at the company. Now, you'll see this bad email that we all would look at and say, that is a fake email for sure. There's no way they're saying dear buyer. Obviously, it's come from the sketchy person named Jim Peterson, so that's kind of questionable to begin with. And then you have just the generalized communication. This is the way it used to be. Now, AI has significantly improved it. And if you look at this message, right, this is an AI generated phishing attack. To me, this is one of the best ones I've seen, because it's individualized. Like, it can use AI to pull first names from their email list, right? It can tie that into this message. They've created what looks like a harmless domain, but is a different domain altogether than CBS. It's got Karen Lynch's actual signature file in here. This is a great one. This type of email will trick a lot of people who aren't skeptical, who don't know, I never should click anything unless I am more than 100% sure. I don't know how you get more than 100% sure, but we would find a way. More than 100% sure that it is for me and it's the right location. So just having that skepticism when we look at something like this to know that these are out there in the wild. Next technology is access management. Now, we used to say, hey, I'm going to have a couple different folders in my environment. When everything went online, I'm going to have a couple folders in SharePoint, and I'm going to assign access to a person based on their job description or their role. Well, we decided that's not quite enough. So we want to say, let's up the ante a little bit, not just say username and password to give access. Let's say that Kai, in this example, has to be on her assigned computer on the right network, whether that's local or VPN, and using the right application. So if we can check a box on all of those, then I can open up the HR and finance folder. But until that happens, Kai still doesn't have access to it. There's a couple different solutions, identity access management, privilege access management, zero trust, kind of rattling off a few conversations. Again, the goal here isn't to be masters of all these, it's just to get a good understanding of the technologies that are out there. But if we think about those kind of things, we can really limit a bad actor's access to data from the perspective of the right application isn't launched. If they're on the right network, if they're remoting in from somewhere else and just happen to bypass technology, they're not going to get to the data, which is a really critical part. Now comes the fun from the nerdy technical side, right? We talk about the bookends, MDR, managed detection and response, security awareness training, multi-factor authentication, all that stuff's on the front end to stop things from coming through. We have our business continuity disaster recovery on the back end to help us recover if we have an issue. But there's not really anything except for SIEM, Security Information and Event Manager, that'll find an issue or a breach or incident in the middle of the attack. So we need something to, and so where SIEM came from is we need to understand that there could be correlating events. I could have something going on my server and on my firewall that identify a problem. So changing access levels on the server while data is going out through the firewall. I want to correlate those two things and say something's not right here. I also need to say every device in my environment, including my software as a service or SaaS applications, I need to pull all the logs into a central repository. So that's where Security Information and Event Manager was born. It's been around for a couple of decades now. It's been around for a long time, really launching over the past 5 years, mostly around the compliance need to be able to do forensics on information and find incidents and threats in the middle of their attack. But if we take all of this data and we say, okay, at this core central solution, I'm going to pull all my logs from all these appliances and pull them together, it significantly helps us find those threats midstream. Now, like I said, Security Information and Event Manager has that same SOC or Security Operations Center that MDR leverages. And the whole goal there is I have somebody watching this 24/7, 365. So if something kicks off, we can respond to it quickly. And how this works in the real world, if we have a small business or again, a small nonprofit, we have 25 users, 5 servers, 3 sites, a couple of SaaS or software as a service applications. And I have a user login from LA. And let's say this is Microsoft 365. Debbie logs in from LA because she's out in California for a little bit. Everything's good. It's going to log that event and say nothing to do. Debbie gained access. That's great. At the same time, another user logs in with Debbie's account from the UK, right? We'd all say that's a problem that can happen, right? Because we're in 2 different locations. Well, in that case, that second alert is going to trigger an impossible travel warning, notify the Security Operations Center, and then they're going to take the steps of changing passwords, disabling accounts, and then notifying the user or team. One of the challenges with all of this is when we look at that environment, 25 users, 5 servers, 3 sites, 2 applications, we're getting somewhere around 430 events per second. When SIEMs or Security Information and Event Managers were originally created and running in environments, it was a much lower number. And unfortunately, we would say, well, we'll just have the techs or engineers review the logs. Still not good enough, but that's what happened. So a lot of SIEMs decayed over time. By adding the SOC in there, you can stay current, make sure that appliance is up and running properly, and then responded to quickly. All right, that was a lot of technology. Now we'll talk
Okay.
about if SIM is the favorite from the nerd side, right? BCDR is the favorite from the protection side. Debbie, I know if you jump
Yeah.
into.
Yeah. I just, again, I've got a question here. What are the, if, okay, somebody reports to their employer, okay, I just clicked on an unfamiliar link, it didn't take me anywhere, or it took me to an unavailable screen or something. What are the next steps that the organization should do in that situation? Does it mean there's been a breach? Where can you look for evidence of the breach, or what can they do right away to try to, stop the process?
Yeah, great question. So what would happen right out of the gate? So I click the link and I send it off to my IT team again, which we should celebrate the fact that they raised their hand and said, I made a
Yeah.
mistake.
Yeah.
Sometimes we hide from them. So the high five, I mean, not for clicking it, right? But high five for notifying the team. The first thing they're going to do is review the email to say what's going on. Where is the link sending them? Then they can go through some there's some research that we can do around that specific URL to say if it's a threat. Assuming it is a threat, right? We're going to start monitoring for things like password changes, rights elevations, file access, data going out of the firewall. A lot of times, and unfortunately, depending on what they find on that link, because there's so many potential challenges you could have. A lot of times it's down to we need to rebuild that machine to make sure that nothing happened on the computer itself if they can't determine it. Definitely changing passwords is typically step number 2, just so they don't access any cached credentials on the computer or even if you put information in. So there's a wide path or wide berth of things that get done when you click a link from the IT discovery side. But again, they did the right thing by raising their hands and saying, I need help. So great question. All right, business continuity disaster recovery. Again, we never want to hand over recovery of our environment to the bad actor. We want to make sure we can recover our business and from a disaster at the same time, or continue to operate our business and recover from disaster at the same time. One of the challenges we have around BCDR is there's kind of 3 categories of data. Data we know and protect. And again, that's the stuff in our SharePoint, in our servers, if we still have them. We handle that. We manage the recovery on that. Then there's data that we know about that we don't protect. And that's going to be in our software as a service applications. So things that are in the internet that we don't have requirement to back up. Again, Office 365 is not in that category. We should be backing up Office 365 because their recovery is different than most businesses need. So doing that with a SaaS backup or software as a service backup is really important. But then there's the ERP applications, the financial applications that do their own data protection. Then the last category is the scary one, data we don't know about. And again, in nonprofits, this can be real challenging because a lot of times we have BYOD or bring your own device policies. We may have unsanctioned applications. We may be sharing information with other nonprofits or industries or communities at large. So we have to monitor and say, where is our data? Because as data grows, both in size and in locations, we have to make sure we're covering that, because if it's critical to us or it's critical to not get out, we need to know where it's at so we can, number 1, secure it and make it recoverable. And that's going to come from a process that's been around for a long time called 3-2-1. 3 copies of your data on 2 different medias, 1 being far away. Now that 1 being far away was a challenge a decade ago. It's super easy now. Now we've added this plus secure configuration to the phrase, because if you have 10 copies of your data, but you don't protect them properly, you might as well have 0, because the bad actors are going to typically attack that first. So how that looks in a real world scenario is we have our production, our local, and our offsite backup. First things first, let's get a little geographic distance between our local and offsite. And this is more typically for the disaster side of things. If I had a fire, a flood, tornado, something happened, even a major hardware failure, we want to make sure that we have something far away that we can recover from. So the easiest step today. Now, as we have software as a service or SaaS applications, new data, BYOD data that we want to move to sanctioned apps from unsanctioned apps. Again, the difference is, right, my business works with 365, so I want everything in SharePoint and OneDrive. I don't want it in somebody's personal Box account or Dropbox account because I can't control it, I can't protect it, I can't recover it. So as that production data is identified, it's added to the local and it's added to the offsite. Now, if you're 100% SaaS, you're typically going to have two offsite locations, but we'll consider one the local and one the offsite at that point. We want to make sure it's in all three locations. What we're using today, how we recover step one, and how we recover step two. From there, what happens if someone attacks the network, right? There's a breach on the network. We have to leverage something called immutable storage. You may have also heard this as air gap storage. And the whole premise here is that the backups are isolated and they cannot be deleted or destroyed. Meaning, even if I went in and deleted the file because I'm a bad actor and I got access to this secondary network, the systems themselves will not technically remove it from the drives or the disk so that it can immediately be recovered or rehydrated is the term they use. So at the end of the day, bad actors want to go in and delete your backups so that you can't recover from them. Immutable storage stops them from being able to do that. Now, the last thing to consider is recoverability. So we all have, every business, every nonprofit, every organization has their maximum tolerable downtime. How long can we be affected by an outage and still operate? Now, it may be an hour for a hospital, as an example. It could be a week for a small business, depending on their organization. That's a really long time, by the way. We say 3 days is kind of the maximum, and after that, the percentage of business closure grows dramatically. But we want to make sure whatever our maximum tolerable downtime is, we can recover in that time frame. So if I say my maximum tolerable downtime is 48 hours, I need to make sure that all my recovery options can meet that criteria. So it's just something to think about. A lot of times that'll come up through an assessment, whether that assessment is internal or external. Now, as we're starting to wrap up this conversation, I know I threw a lot of acronyms out there. Thank you, Debbie, for calling me out on a couple of those. I really appreciate it. But we'll say there's kind of 6 foundational core cybersecurity requirements. Now, when we talk about these, they're doing 3 things. It's the increased protection, giving us the maximum potential protection that most businesses can incorporate. So there's obviously more we could do here. We could have probably 12 or 13, but a lot of times they really start to decrease our usability or they get very, very expensive. So we're trying to find that smooth road. And if we follow these 6, we can have the best potential security at cost. We also start finding really great cybersecurity insurance premiums when we implement all 6 of these technologies. And last, if you're in any sort of compliance-driven world, it helps follow most compliance standards, or at least keeps us on the road of most compliance standards. And these are going to be an incident response plan. What do I do if something happens? Now, this is where we get a little bit crazy in the tech world, because we're going to say you need an incident response plan, you need a business continuity plan, you need a disaster recovery plan, and all those are true. But at the end of the day, if I lose access to my information or somebody gains access to my business or my information, I need to know what to do. What is step one? And a lot of times it could be contacting your insurance premium provider. It could be contacting your internal team to stop the attack. It could be working with your outsourced managed service provider. But understanding what you do, because in these situations, we're all scared, we're a little frantic, and it's really easy to make the wrong decision. It's really easy to destroy the forensic evidence that's going to prove that you weren't breached, which is really what we're trying to do here, or that you were breached and you need to identify people. So incident response plan is critical. And then we look at the next step is, how do I protect that front end? And that'd be endpoint or hopefully managed detection and response. We really want to push that MDR side, because we know that having someone watch that 24/7, 365 significantly increases the protection level. Multi-factor and security awareness training are the 2 least expensive, most impactful things that you can do for any organization of any size or kind. Making sure that your credential isn't the only way you're accessing information, and making sure you're very skeptical of anything that comes into your environment. If we do these 2 things, we can significantly reduce attacks. Then we say security information and event manager with a SOC tied to it, or security operations center. How do we find issues after they've gotten into an environment, but before they've actually wreaked a lot of havoc? How do we find it in the middle? And that's where SIM and SOC come in. And then at the end, recovery, right? How do we stay in charge of our recovery at all times? Now, when we talk about all these technologies, one of the challenges is what do I have already? Like what technology have I implemented? And again, this is where those assessments can come into play. And whether your internal team goes off this plan and says, yes, we have 4 of the 6, let's talk about the other 2, or we don't think we need the other 2 and let's discuss why. Whether you have an outside security provider come in and say, here's what you have, here's what you need. At the end of the day, understanding where you fall in that path is one of the most important things you can do for your nonprofit or your small business. Now, one thing, talking with Link High, I know that they were really excited to say, well, we're having this big conversation about all these things that nonprofits and small business can do. Their question was, what can we do to help in this environment? And I thought this was pretty great. They're offering a complimentary, no cost, no commitment assessment of your environment. We say we want to look at this if you're unsure of where you're at, or even if you're sure of where you're at and you just want a second set of eyes to be like, yep, you're exactly where you think you are. Great job. We agree on all fronts. That's what we want to hear. Unfortunately, we don't always hear that. We typically, when we're doing an assessment, we find stuff. And again, it's not negative, it's just awareness. So Link High, I know that the team from Link High will be dropping that link into the chat. So if you're interested in having this assessment done, again, we'd highly recommend it, having somebody do it. Again, whether that's an internal company, internal team member, or an external team member doing this, having an assessment at least on an annual basis to give you some direction will be super helpful. All right, so we are wrapping it up. Debbie, you want to jump in there?
I got a couple questions here.
Oh, yeah.
First of all, Joanna, thank you for posting that link, and thank you for making the offer. That's really a great service that you're providing. One of the questions I have is, do you have recommendations for finding the right cybersecurity insurance provider?
Yeah, we have a whole conversation we'll have around cybersecurity insurance. Really, the best bet that we have found as of today is to work with a cybersecurity insurance broker specifically, because a lot of insurance providers will carry cyber policies, but oftentimes they have a lot of limitations, especially if they're a writer on your business insurance policy. So a company like Fifth Wall can help identify what you have currently and help you find the right policy for you. And again, it's going to be based on size of payout, types of payout. One of the interesting things is we think of ransom and extortion, but a lot of cybersecurity insurance can also protect against revenue disruption, supply chain disruptions. Lots of reasons out there that they can help in a catastrophe. So Fifth Wall, and you may have a local cybersecurity broker in your region. One of the things that I would probably do is talk to my internal IT team, or Link High if you don't have one, or you're looking for a secondary conversation around there to help get recommendations specifically in your area.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to jump in here too, because the center does have a list of insurance providers, and including some who provide cybersecurity insurance. And these are people that we know are experienced dealing with nonprofits. So always, you can just send us an email and we'll send you a list of people. I always send multiple people. You want to ask around. Okay, don't just take one person's word for it. But that's available through the center.
Perfect.
Awesome. Another question I have is, does the vendor that we host our website with keep a backup of the data?
Yeah, and this is one of the biggest challenges we have, is our third party, like a vendor that provides a website or any service. What are they doing to protect and make data secure and recoverable? And these are questions we have to ask, and it's that third party risk thing. So whether you're looking into it, your team's looking into it, or you work with an outside provider to help assess this, looking through the contract and asking questions. We have to do it on almost every vendor that we work with today, because we typically exchange data.
Great. Okay. Let me see. We've got a couple more here. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I just add, sorry, this is I'm calling. I work at Link High. Just one of the things too is also to make sure that you own, if you're your own company and you're using an outsourced MSP or whatever, that you know what your passwords are. So if something happens to them, you actually have access to all your data. Like that's a huge thing too, that if something goes bad, that you're not relying on a third party to have all your passwords, that you know your passwords, so that there's like not a lag in fixing stuff because somehow you don't know where your data is stored.
Thank you, Alexandra. That's great. Another question I have is, do you have recommendations on the process of sending email confidential documents?
Yeah, so there's a lot of, we would say anytime you're going to send confidential documents, we need to use a secure encrypted process for that. There's a lot of different applications that can help with that. Microsoft itself has an encryption option. We would say that'd be the best way to do it. There's a lot of file share, document share type of services out there. At the end of the day, we want to make sure it's going to be tied to a specific user and that the communication is encrypted from end to end. Microsoft does this by default in a lot of their applications like OneDrive and SharePoint. One of the challenges we have with this, though, is that I may give access to a file or folder and I forget about it for a long time. So making sure we're reviewing those lists of shares that we've done, especially if we've done it out of one of our SaaS-based or software as a service-based applications. There's a lot of them out there, but again, at the end of the day, we want to make sure it's directed to a specific person who has to code every time they access it, and we want to make sure it's encrypted end to end.
Wow, yeah. I hadn't thought about shared files that from 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
yeah, especially if you do a folder and then you keep using that folder.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, I think, I just one more question. How will you send code and email also? I'm not sure if that's clear. Can the person who just posted that, do you want to unmute?
Sorry. Yes. I didn't know we can unmute. Thank you. So the problem we've been having is when we send documents, we send them through email. So we've amassed such a staff that we're all sending, documents here and there, but we don't have a process on sending confidential documents. So that's why I asked. And now we're starting to, when we scan documents, the people put a code on it. But also sending the code, sending it an email is like a kind of, so thank you for your expertise, Jim.
Yeah, no, great question. And any process that we create, if we sat down in a room, we could probably beat up too. At the end of the day, one thing to think about if we're going to be actually emailing attachments, and we'll say attachments versus links is two different things. If I send an attachment out to Debbie, right, it's from its original location. Let's say it was in SharePoint. It's also now in my inbox, and it's now also in Debbie's inbox. So we now have 3 copies of the data that we have to secure, which one's current, lots of little questions there. When we think about sharing confidential information, this really amps up that challenge, because if I get breached, anything you sent me is now susceptible. So I do like doing links to data versus the actual attachment themselves when you can. It just allows you to have more control on what happens to that data. You can say they can't download it, they can only view it, they can't edit it. You can start setting limitations on what can happen with that data. There's still some risks out there, but at the end of the day, if I'm going to send a file and I'm going to encrypt that file, and I have to use some sort of code, like you said, right? Sending it in an encrypted fashion through Microsoft specifically will allow that code to be all on the remote end. So Microsoft will do the authentication versus you sending the code to decrypt it. But there's a lot of ways to, I don't want to say improve, because that sounds like you're not doing the right thing. You're doing a great thing by creating it, but just maybe enhance that process by considering doing more of the links versus the attachments.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll just throw these up here real quick, because I know we're running out of time. I talk way too long, but just to understand that we're all targets, right? We're all being attacked all the time. They don't care about who we are or our role in the company. They care that we click and that we do the activity. So we're all targets. And if we don't invest in technology, we become more susceptible to those risks, which is a real challenge. Building the right defense layer is important for your specific needs. So having someone come and tell you, hey, here's the specific things that will help protect you, versus just the general conversation of the 6 things that I posted up there that may work for you or may not be enough or maybe a little too much. And last is knowing those risks. I harp a lot on assessments, and I'm really thankful that LinkHigh has offered to do these assessments, because they get lost in the shuffle often. We just don't review our environments enough to know, oh, that equipment needs to retire. It is time to move on. It's got too many risks. So I'll stop there. I'm sure there's a lot of things, Debbie, that you want to jump into, but thank you very much for your time, and I'm here to answer questions.
But again, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the center. We do have an events a calendar on our website, and it's not just our things. It's events that other people are offering. Some of our partners who do special trainings for nonprofits, but also some other people out there that are having conferences and other types of trainings, board trainings, etc. So please go to our calendar periodically and check and see what's coming up that might be of interest. The center ourselves, we are offering on this Thursday, we're offering a webinar, and again, this is free, on New Jersey 211. I'm always astonished that people are out there still don't necessarily know what that is. 211 is a service that you can call to get information about service providers in the area, in your region. So maybe somebody needs help with housing, somebody needs help with mental health, anything like that. There's both an online and a phone line, but they also have a system where you can go in online, look this up, and also we're trying to make sure that nonprofits who offer these services are listed with NJ211 so people can be referred to you. The other one we're offering on May 7th is Navigating the Future of Work. It's about HR strategies for recruitment and retention of staff, and looking at the changes in the work environment being offered by another center member, Real HR, and it's free to members and $45 for non-members. On August 13th, that's a ways away, but we're very excited about this. We're collaborating with the Council of New Jersey Grantmakers to do a joint forum policy. We'll be looking at nonprofit and philanthropic champions for New Jersey and what's happening in that philanthropic world. Finally, in December, first Wednesday in December is our annual conference, so put it on your calendar now. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we are a membership organization. We have certain special offers for our members, such as our Member Mondays call every 2 weeks. We have a call on Monday from 12:30 to 1:15, and it's a informal, flexible thing where we can talk about what issues people are facing, what needs they have, what ideas they want to exchange, etc. And then, of course, there's the nonprofit help desk. We give our members a little extra in-depth service. We have recorded webinars like from this one and many in the past, which are free to our members. And we also have job postings that are free to the members. So just keep that in mind, as there are resources, and always, again, check the website or ask us. Now, if you're not a member, we do have a special offer where we'll give you 10% off your annual dues. As I said earlier, the dues are on a sliding scale, starting at $99 for organizations that have a budget of $50,000 and less, and then it goes up from there. But if you want to join, you can go to our website and use the discount code HORSENJ, all no spaces, and you will get a 10% discount on your membership. So please consider joining the center. Finally, I want to thank Link High Technologies and Jim Peterson for this excellent presentation. I'm going to want to watch it again myself, I'm sure. And just so you know, the contact person at Link High Technologies is Victor Liu, and his email and phone number are here on this last slide. So I want to thank everybody for coming, for attending this, and the conversation isn't over. You'll be getting the webinar and the slides, and we will be happy to hear from you if you have, further questions and or suggestions. If you have ideas for topics for us to continue to offer in our education program, we're always eager to hear from you. So I want to thank everybody, Jim and Alexandra and Joanna, who are here from HighLink, and we can, we're grateful for your support for the center and for making this excellent information available to our members and friends.